For centuries, the Roman Empire was an unstoppable machine. Its boots crushed the sands of Africa, the hills of Spain, and the plains of Gaul. But in the late summer of the year 9 AD, that machine marched into a green hell from which it would never return. Imagine 15,000 battle-hardened legionaries, thousands of camp followers, and the pride of the Roman eagle, snaking through a forest so dense it swallowed the sun. They thought they were marching to a winter camp. In reality, they were marching into a tomb. This is the story of the Teutoburg forest, the disaster that broke the heart of an emperor and changed the map of the world forever. To understand the catastrophe, we must understand the two men at its center. The first was Publius Quinctilius Varus. He was a man of the establishment, a seasoned politician and administrator who had governed Syria with an iron fist. He was not a fool, but he was arrogant. He viewed the Germanic tribes not as a military threat, but as a provincial nuisance to be taxed and civilized. He believed the Roman peace was absolute. The second man was his closest advisor, Arminius. To Varus, Arminius was a success story of Roman integration. A prince of the Cherusci tribe, Arminius had been taken to Rome as a hostage in his youth. He was granted Roman citizenship, rose to the rank of equestrian, and was trained in the very heart of the Roman military machine. He knew the drills, the formations, and the psychological weaknesses of the legionaries. But beneath the Roman breastplate beat the heart of a Germanic warrior who had never forgotten his roots. While he drank wine with Varus and plotted Roman routes, he was secretly uniting the fractured, feuding tribes of the north into a single, lethal fist. The trap was set with a whisper. Reports reached Varus of a minor uprising deep in the Germanic interior. It was a fabrication, a lure designed to pull the Roman column off the established military roads and into the trackless wilderness of the Teutoburg forest. Despite warnings from other tribal leaders who suspected Arminius of treachery, Varus trusted his friend. He ordered the 17th, 18th, and 19th legions to turn into the woods. As the Romans moved deeper into the forest, the terrain began to turn against them. The path narrowed until it was barely wide enough for two men to walk abreast. The line of march stretched for miles, an elongated, vulnerable serpent of steel and wood. Then the sky broke. A violent, unrelenting storm turned the forest floor into a swamp. The heavy Roman shields became waterlogged and doubled in weight. The soldiers' leather boots lost their grip in the slick mud. It was at this moment, when the Romans were at their most exhausted and disorganized, that the woods screamed. From the impenetrable thickets, a rain of javelins began. The Germanic tribes didn't fight in the open fields where Roman discipline thrived. They fought from the shadows. They used hit-and-run tactics, striking the middle of the column and vanishing before the Romans could form their famous tortoise shield walls. For the first day, the Romans fought with the desperation of cornered animals. They managed to build a fortified camp for the night, but the atmosphere was grim. They were surrounded by an invisible enemy, and the rain would not stop. By the second day, the situation turned from dire to hopeless. Varus attempted to break out into more open country, but Arminius had anticipated every move. The tribes had built massive earthen walls and trenches along the Roman path, funneling the legions into kill zones. The Romans were forced to abandon their heavy baggage, their supplies, and their pride. Men who had conquered the world were now being picked off by warriors they considered barbarians. The final act took place near the calcareous hill. Here, the passage between a steep, wooded slope and a great moor was only a few hundred yards wide. The Germanic tribes had constructed a long wall of earth and wood, perfectly camouflaged. As the remnants of the three legions stumbled into this bottleneck, the tribesmen poured over the wall in a massive, coordinated assault. It was no longer a battle. It was a slaughter. Varus, seeing that all was lost and fearing the slow, agonizing death the tribes reserved for Roman generals, chose to take his own life. He fell upon his sword, following the grim tradition of his father and grandfather before him. Most of his high-ranking officers followed suit. With their leaders dead, the remaining legionaries lost all hope. Some fought to the last man. Others were taken captive to be sacrificed to the Germanic gods in sacred groves. The three golden eagles, the sacred standards of the legions, were captured, a disgrace from which no Roman unit could ever truly recover. The news took weeks to reach Rome. When it finally arrived, the city was paralyzed with fear. It was the greatest defeat the empire had suffered since the days of Hannibal. The historian Suetonius records that the Emperor Augustus, now an old man, was so shattered by the news that he refused to cut his hair or beard for months. He would wander the halls of his palace, sometimes banging his head against the walls and crying out, "Quinctilius Varus, give me back my legions." The aftermath was profound. Rome would eventually send forces back into Germania under the general Germanicus to recover the lost eagles and bury the bleached bones of their fallen comrades. They found the battlefield years later, a grisly landscape of rusted armor and skeletons nailed to trees. While Rome won several vengeful victories, the will to conquer Germania was gone. Augustus's successor, Tiberius, decided that the Rhine River would be the permanent border of the empire. The Varus Catastrophe drew a line in the sand, or rather, a line in the forest that would endure for centuries. It ensured that the Germanic people would remain outside the Roman orbit, preserving their own languages, laws, and customs. Had Varus been more cautious or Arminius less cunning, the map of Europe might look entirely different today. We might all be speaking a Romance language, and the very concept of Germany might never have existed. In the end, the Battle of Teutoburg Forest reminds us that even the most powerful empires are fragile. It shows us that local knowledge and a desperate will for independence can overcome even the most sophisticated military machine. The forest eventually reclaimed the bones and the rusted swords, but the memory of those three lost legions remains a haunting shadow over the history of Rome. It was the day the invincible empire learned the meaning of fear, and the day the modern world began to take its shape in the mud and the rain of a dark Germanic wood.